Okay, so a National Cat Action Plan. Why do we need one? Well, as most of you would be aware, coming from many different states, there's a huge array of activity in most states. And ranging from the ACT many years ago, having permits required to keep an entire cat, which was probably one of the earliest establishments of some sort of breeder permit legislation, to Tassie and Gold Coast City Council now are requiring cats to be desexed prior to sale or transfer by breeders, all breeders. There's lots of individual councils like Moreton Bay Regional Council who've introduced breeder permit systems very well. New South Wales Task Force has recommended breeder and seller permits in their recent deliberations. South Australia Select Committee has also made a similar recommendation of breeder permits and desexing cats before sale. And microchipping over the last few years has pretty much become part of every state's legislation, except that it still doesn't require the breeder details. It requires it early, but doesn't necessarily have to have the breeder details on it. So as you can see, there's a huge array there. So the objectives of this National Cat Action Plan that has been put together by the G2Z Steering Committee with representatives from every state is to try to seek agreement on the need for common legislation, first of all. I guess we don't want to assume that that's the case, but we would like some to be able to go forward to governments and say if there is a general agreement that we should have some common statewide legislation that's nationally consistent. And secondly, to work towards consistent, effective, state-based. We acknowledge we're not going to get national cat and dog legislation for some time, but at least nationally consistent state-based legislation and policies in line with an ethical approach, meaning that we would like to improve the well-being of not only domestic cats and but other animals and whole communities. What's happened here? Sorry, I've lost it. Why a cat focus? Okay, many of you would probably be aware. Still having trouble with this. Sorry? Yeah, it's playing up a little bit. Okay. Oops. Just not trying to go back now. Okay, some of you would be aware that there's been considerable work underway already on trying to address puppy farming issues. And because puppies are very cute, they've tended to take quite a lot of priority and people very upset about puppy farming. So there was a national consultation process by RSPCA Australia a couple of years ago. So that's why we're focusing on cats, because there already has been quite a bit of work done. Also, when you consider the state of cats has been discussed by international speakers, I mean, a lot of them in shelters are not doing that great. And so we really need to do something about that. And we have some very frightened cats who are unsocialised coming into our shelters too. So when you compare that with puppy mills, I guess there's a very big justification for doing some focusing on cats. Plus, there's 3 times the euthanasia rate of cats than dogs in pounds and shelters in Australia. Those of you who were in the presentation yesterday would have seen that. And their breeding rates are much faster, we all know that. And breeding rates, desexing limitations are quite not as high as we expect, although 98% of lifetime registered cats on the companion animal register were desexed. When you look at the New South Wales data, only 43% of the microchipped cats were actually desexed, the 500,000 microchipped cats. So it isn't, and Mandy Simmons presented some data on that too. So the current numbers, 64% of cats euthanased in New South Wales, extrapolated to the national figure, it's quite large, and the latest research that was presented by Diana yesterday with not full cooperation from everywhere yet, 56% nationally. So we can see that it's very high, and it's only 20% for dogs, so it's almost 3 times. Is the number reducing? Well, if we look at the last 6 years in New South Wales, which is the only state that we have data, it's gone from 68% to 64%, so only a 4% reduction in euthanasia rates. So basically that's very low, But there are some better models in Australia. So whole of city data in the ACT, 34% of all Australian surrendered cats euthanised, and in the Gold Coast 27%, a 40% reduction in incoming stray cats and 50% reduction in euthanasia of cats. So those sort of models, plus some international models, and by the way, if you have some great success stories, we're not saying they're the only ones, please send them to us. The international models, we've seen some great ones from Washoe County, for example. There's others as well. 22% euthanised in 2007 down to 4% in 2010. So when you look at the strategies that are being used, and in Oklahoma, 3 cities on the website comment that they have found a lot of success through breeder and seller legislation and availability of low-cost DESEXING. So, the National Cat Action Plan aims to cover domestic cats. So that's any cats that have had human contact, but they may not necessarily be owned. So they may be the ones that are in owned places, in very increasingly crowded owned places. They may be cats that have just got tired of living where they are, and because we haven't been very good at keeping them in their own yard, we do end up with a lot of cats heading off in all directions. Still trying to get that slide up. On the loose, and so they are included in this plan as well. And as well we have, as soon as I can get this working, still causing me a problem. We also have cats, this is Tiff, my cat, sitting watching me prepare this presentation, who was abandoned by his owners. So not only do stray cats go wandering themselves, sometimes the owners go wandering and end up with a cat left behind and ending up becoming very timid and very shy. And in addition, over the last 100 years, we've had state governments abandoning cats, as in taking them out west and letting them loose to handle issues out west. And I thought, this is from Dr. Chris Dickman's paper, who's presenting soon. It was very interesting that they've taken out holus bolus hundreds of cats and released them, and yet now we see these headlines like ferals run wild, more than 4,000 cats having to be shot. So we have this huge dichotomy of cats that are treated extremely well and cats that are treated as vermin dumped in bats of trucks. So in this first plan, the National Cat Action Plan, which I hope you'll take a copy of as you leave the door, it's on our where all our t-shirts are, as you leave today. We're not dealing with the unowned, unsocialised cats yet, but we're hoping our discussions today with some very important people who've got different perspectives on it will be able to help us develop a similar National Cat Action discussion paper for those unowned and unsocialised cats, and ones that just happen to be born in the wild, that have never had the opportunity to even get to know or trust a human being. So the National Cat Action Plan discussion paper involves all stakeholders, and we will be putting it online as soon as Nell gets time to go back and settle in after the summit. And that will mean people will be able to click on their particular stakeholder group and have a look to see where they might be able to contribute and give us some feedback. And so, because not all our stakeholder groups are in the room, I'm just going to go through a quick flick so that you can see the sorts of things that are in it, because you will need to spend some time reading. So let's go. So we're asking for state government contribution, nationally consistent statewide breeder and seller permit system, microchipping addressed back to the breeder. All pounds and rescue groups required to desex all cats and kittens prior to rehoming, cat registration as a means of funding returning home desexing and education resources, and pet-friendly accommodation requirements could be improved a lot on a state-by-state basis. So which state department goals are being met by doing those things, we believe? Local government departments, animal welfare departments and environment departments. So there should be a huge collaboration between those three in moving forward, we hope. Breeder permit systems are explained in more detail in the document, but basically that's a little flow chart to show how on the Gold Coast we approached the process. So we formed a stakeholder coalition. We then developed a code of standards, a code of practice with standards which were required, which then went into the Gold Coast local law. We're hoping they'll go into state legislation. We developed an inspection system A user pays system, so we then worked out the costs and what was reasonable and workable for breeders. We met with all the breeders. Of course, we had breeders on our stakeholder coalition. Requirement to publish breeder permit numbers, awareness promotion, a nationally consistent register of permitted breeders, and desexing of all kittens prior to sale with desexing subsidy support. And you'll see the links, I won't go through that, but this is the process of what I just talked about then. You'll see all of that in the document. And I just thought I'd show you, this is the way we've phrased getting around the fact that some vets still want to have control over whether or not they should desex a kitten at 8 to 10 weeks. In the Gold Coast legislation, we require that kittens are not to be sold till they're 10 weeks of age, which gives you that extra 2 weeks leeway, and that they either have to have a certificate saying they're desexed, or a statement from a vet that says the animal is likely to be at serious risk to the animal's health if they are desexed, or evidence that they have been passed on to a holder of a breeder permit. So that's just there for you to refer to if you need to. Pet sellers also, we believe, need to desex all kittens and cats if they take in cats prior to sale or transfer and operate with permits. Try and get this moving. Sorry, I'm pressing. Okay, microchipping, as I've already said, breeders' details need to be recorded, and we need exchange of data between microchipping databases. While registration hasn't been a great solution, it is possibly an assistance, so we have put that in there. Ding. And pet-friendly accommodation has already been progressed a bit in ACT and New South Wales, and we will put links to those. I've only just found out about New South Wales progressing theirs. We will put links to those on the website eventually. Oh dear, this is really difficult. Then we go into local government contributions, which we believe they should administer the breeder and seller permit legislation. If it's a user pays situation, it means that the funding comes from the breeders to employ the appropriate staff and do the paperwork, and do lots of desexing programs and cooperative funding programs and so on. And I won't have time to go into those in depth today. Lots of owner support, which we've been talking about with Mark, returning animals home instead of impounding them and so on. That's all in there. This is something you might like to access in the document to convince your council it's more worthwhile to put money into a community desexing program, which might cost them $40 to $50 per cat, than spend $220, which is what it costs on average to collect, hold and euthanize one cat. And in states where you've got to hold it for 14 days, it's $400. And so there are huge savings over time if they put more money into cooperative desexing programs and work with animal welfare agencies to do that. And we've been getting $10,000 from the Gold Coast City Council for the last few years. With great results. Declining numbers of kittens coming in. Encouraging local government to share statistics, all of that. Animal welfare groups, which is all of you, there's a whole section on that, and how we believe animal welfare groups can help local government and use their skills to do all of these things. Press. There's a section on breeders and what we think breeders... So a lot of it is overlapping, but the reason we've done this is so that a breeder can go directly to their section and not have to read through everybody else's section, if you're wondering why some of them repeat the same things. That was part of our discussion. Sellers, there's a section there for sellers. And veterinarians need to be proficient in desexing of cats from 8 to 10 weeks and so on. Vet schools. So hopefully we'll be getting into dialogue with some vet schools, which I know Jackie's talking about a little bit more. Cat owners, journalists can play their role, real estate professionals, wildlife and conservation groups can really play their role as well. So how can you help with this National Cat Action Plan? We'd love you to read the discussion paper. As I said, get a copy as you go out, but it's also going to be online, and we're going to have a way to submit your responses electronically or in writing. Share with your managers, your council staff, your boards, your other stakeholders in your city or shire, and send constructive feedback. Right? Even the feedback that you get that might be from different parts of your shire that say, oh, we couldn't do that because, that's the sort of feedback we need. Because if we're going to work towards solutions, we need to know all the feedback. So there's a list of questions at the back of the document that we'd love you to respond to. And as I said, we'll have electronic ways of doing that once we get settled back from the summit. Almost finished. And your responses will then add to or modify the proposal. The revised document will be addressed at a national meeting of stakeholder representatives. So we're not saying we'll have a big, every single person coming along, but we'll be addressing it with stakeholder representatives from all the groups. And then we'll work through you and through our G2Z website to continue to work and lobby with governments to try to progress those things. And that's our National Cat Action Plan proposed timeline. So you can see it's draft 6 and we haven't even put it out yet. We were very ambitious when we started, but by the time we discussed it with the steering committee, it's already the summit time. But we are kind of hoping to still have a National Cat Action Plan meeting in November, which is only 2 months away. But that would mean you going back with this in your hand now, reading it straight away and starting to work out when your board meetings are, getting copies off our website, getting them all reading it, getting feedback in 2 months. And if that becomes too hard, we need to hear from you because we will extend the deadline if we have to, because there's no point proceeding if everybody hasn't had time to give us feedback. Right, so this is about everybody giving feedback. Please encourage all the stakeholders in your city or shire to be part of this, whether you have stakeholder coalitions or not. And thank you for listening to that.